The table at Henley on the river was set with white linen and tea light candles. My champagne glass left a small wet ring on the tablecloth every time I set it down, and I kept picking it up and putting it back because I didn't know what to do with my hands. The plaque was in front of me. Vanderbilt University Medical Center Nurse of the Year. I had walked up to accept it 2 hours earlier in front of 300 people, and my hands had shaken the whole time. 6 years of double shifts. 6 years of studying for certification exams in my car on 30-minute lunch breaks. 6 years of driving an hour each way for continuing education classes I paid for myself. My colleagues were at the table. Dr. Hartley, the head of my unit, was on my left. Felicity, my closest friend at the hospital, sat across from me. The department director had flown in from the administrative offices and was talking to my father about college football. My mother was there. My father was there. My younger sister Bree was there, posting something on Instagram with her phone under the table like a teenager, even though she was 23 years old. I had paid for all 3 of them to be there. The flights from Fort Wayne, the hotel downtown, their seats at this dinner. I had done it deliberately. I thought that if my mother sat in a room full of people who saw me clearly, real professionals, people with credibility, people who had watched me work, something in her would finally shift. Some recognition would click into place. I had been waiting for that click my whole life. My mother picked up her fork and tapped it against her water glass. The table went quiet in that polite, expectant way. I sat up straighter. My heart was doing something fast and irregular. She smiled at Dr. Hartley. She smiled at the director. It was the warm, church social smile I had grown up watching her give to everyone except me. "I just want to say a few words," she said. Finally, I thought, finally. She talked for almost a minute about the flight delay from Fort Wayne, about the hotel pillows being too soft, about how Nashville traffic was something else. Then she looked at me directly, and her expression shifted into something I can only describe as pleasant contempt. "Clara has always been determined," she said. "I'll say that for her. But what people don't know about my daughter, what this award doesn't show, is that she's always put herself first, her career, her goals, her plans. The rest of us just had to work around that." She paused, smoothing her napkin in her lap. "I won't pretend raising her was easy. It wasn't. She came into this world difficult, and that never really changed." She lifted her glass. "But congratulations, I suppose." Nobody said a word. Felicity's fork was frozen halfway to her mouth. Dr. Hartley had the expression of someone trying to decide whether they'd heard correctly. The department director set down her wine glass very slowly. My father nodded at the tablecloth like my mother had just made a reasonable observation about the weather. Bree didn't look up from her phone. I set my champagne glass down. The small clink it made against the table was the loudest sound in the room. Before I tell you what happened next, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, like and subscribe. Drop a comment. Where are you watching from? My name is Clara. I'm 28 years old. I grew up in Fort Wayne, Indiana, in a house with brown shutters and a yard my father mowed with the careful pride of a man who cared more about appearances than most of what happened inside. I am the older of 2 daughters. Bree is 3 years younger than me. If you need to understand what kind of house it was, here is the clearest way I can tell you. There are exactly 4 photographs of me on display in my parents' home. I counted once when I was 19. 4. 2 are school pictures my mother kept because they came with the package, and she didn't want to waste them. 1 is from Bree's 6th birthday party. I'm in the background, slightly out of focus, holding a paper plate. The last one is my high school graduation photo, and it lives on a shelf behind the television where you have to walk around the couch to see it. Bree has an entire wall. I want to be clear that I'm not saying this for drama. I'm saying it because it tells you everything about the hierarchy of that house without me having to explain another word. I think people who didn't grow up this way have trouble understanding how a child processes it. You don't think, at 10 years old, my parents love my sister more than me. That thought is too big, too terrifying. Instead, you think smaller. You think, I must be doing something wrong. I have to try harder. If I just do well enough, long enough, eventually they'll notice. That belief is the trap. I lived in it for 2 decades. I remember coming home at 10 with a second-place ribbon from the science fair, blue ribbon, papier-mâché model of the water cycle, and holding it up in the kitchen doorway. My mother was giving Bree an after-school snack and didn't turn around. My father was watching the local news. I stood there for 30 seconds before I lowered my arm and went upstairs alone. I remember being 14 and making the honor roll for the third semester in a row. My mother said, "That's good. Don't forget to put your dishes in the sink." That was the entire conversation. Meanwhile, Bree forgot her lines in the school play and received a standing ovation from our parents at the dinner table that night. Her crayon drawings were framed. Her mediocre report cards were met with patience and cheerfully funded tutoring. When my father decided to repaint the upstairs rooms, Bree got the room with the window that faced the backyard. I got the room by the furnace. I didn't hate Bree for any of it. Bree hadn't created the dynamic any more than I had. She just existed inside it the way we both did. She happened to exist at the center, and I happened to exist at the edge. By the time I was 16, I had stopped telling my parents things. Not from anger, from efficiency. Sharing something I was proud of cost energy I didn't get back, so I kept my plans, my dreams, my small private victories behind a wall where they couldn't reach. I became a kind of ghost in that house, drifting through the hallways, watching a family I wasn't really part of. The financial piece started when I was 17. That March, my father was laid off from the logistics company he'd worked at for 11 years. He came home with a cardboard box of desk items and sat at the kitchen table and stared at the wall for a long time. Nobody asked me how I was doing about it. The household just rearranged itself around the crisis, and without a conversation I can point to, I became part of the solution. My mother said it eventually, in the kitchen one morning, while she scrubbed a pan without looking at me. "Clara, you're capable. Bree is still figuring things out. We need you to carry some weight until your father gets back on his feet." Bree was 14. I was 17. We were 3 years apart. I got a job at the CVS on Coliseum Boulevard. Then I picked up weekend shifts at an IHOP 2 miles away. I was bringing home around $350 a week. Most of it went into my mother's hand, not because I wanted to, because she held her hand out and I had been trained deep in my nervous system to fill it. I want to stop here because I know exactly what you're thinking. Why did you keep doing it? Why didn't you stop? I've turned this over in therapy for 2 years. The honest answer is that I was conditioned to believe my worth in that family was transactional, not consciously. I didn't sit down and decide I would earn their love by paying their bills. It happened the way erosion happens, 1 inch at a time, until the ground beneath you has completely shifted and you're standing somewhere different with no memory of walking there. When you grow up being told, not in words but in 10,000 small moments, that your existence is a burden, you learn to offset the burden. You contribute, you make yourself useful. You become the responsible one because responsible is the only version of yourself that ever felt safe in that house. I'm not telling you this to excuse how long I stayed. I'm telling you because if someone watching this is in the same trap right now, I want them to understand. It is not stupidity. It is what happens when love gets replaced by cat's obligation before you're old enough to know the difference. I got into nursing school at IPFW on an academic scholarship. My parents did not celebrate. My mother said nursing was practical. My father said it was a stable field. Neither of them asked why I'd chosen it, which was because I had spent years in a house where nobody took care of anyone, and something in me had turned that absence into a calling. I worked all the way through school. Library shifts, tutoring at the learning center, weekend waitressing. I graduated with a 3.8 GPA and enough clinical hours that I had my pick of residency offers. I took the position in Nashville because it was far enough away to breathe. I told my parents I was moving 800 miles away. My mother's first question was whether I'd still be able to help with the mortgage. I was. That's the part that still takes my breath away when I look back at it. I moved to another state and set up a Zelle recurring transfer for Whitney $800 a month back to Fort Wayne before I even finished unpacking my apartment. I paid Bree's tuition at Ivy Tech, $890 a month, because my parents said they couldn't cover it. I kept them all on my phone plan. I paid for the streaming accounts they used constantly. I know because I could see the watch history, my mother's cooking shows, my father's war documentaries, Bree watching reality TV at 2 in the morning while I worked night shifts in a hospital ICU. Every month, $2,800 left my bank account and went to people who had not once in 28 years asked me how I was doing. I built a real career in Nashville. I was good at what I did. I worked nights my first 2 years, earned additional certifications, got cross-trained in the ICU. Dr. Hartsley started pulling me into the harder cases, the patients who needed someone who wasn't going to flinch. I didn't flinch. I had years of practice. When the Nurse of the Year nomination came through, I sat in my car in the hospital parking garage and cried alone, not from happiness exactly. From something more complicated, this desperate private relief that at least somewhere it had been counted. At least somewhere it was on the record. I called my mother to tell her. She said, "That's nice. Did you get a chance to increase the transfer?" Bree's textbooks this semester were more than we expected. I increased the transfer by 1 and I booked their flights to Nashville for the gala. Because I still had that belief, that insane residual hope, that if I put enough evidence in front of them, in the right room, with the right witnesses, the verdict would change. What changed was not what I expected. My mother's speech at the dinner table, she came into this world difficult, and that never really changed, landed like something dropped from a height she fought. The silence that followed was the particular silence of people who have just witnessed something they can't unwitness. Dr. Hartley put her hand flat on the table between us and looked at me. It wasn't pity, it was recognition, that look said. I see exactly what is happening here, and I see you. I didn't cry. My body had learned that habit so thoroughly that even now, with Felicity's eyes going wide and the department director quietly setting down her glass, my face stayed still. I looked at my mother. I really looked at her. The powder on her cheeks, the satisfied set of her mouth, the way she reached for her water glass like she had just made a sensible toast and was waiting for the room to move on. I understood something in that moment that I had been circling for years without landing. She was not going to change. Not at this dinner. Not at the next one. Not if I received every award a hospital could give or paid off their house entirely, or put Bree through graduate school. She had decided at some point, before I was old enough to have any say in it, that I was difficult. And she had organized the story of her life around that verdict. I had spent 28 years trying to appeal a decision that was never going to be reconsidered. I picked up my award plaque from the table. "Thank you all for being here tonight," I said. My voice was the steadiest it had ever been in that family's presence. "Excuse me." I stood up, kissed Dr. Hartley on the cheek, nodded to my colleagues, and walked out of the private dining room. I didn't look back. The Nashville night was warm for October. I stood on the sidewalk and breathed in car exhaust and the faint smell of the river, and something inside me that had been clenched since I was 10 years old simply let go. Not all at once, more like a fist slowly opening, finger by finger. I went home. I sat on my couch with the plaque on the coffee table and my laptop open in front of me. I pulled up my bank account and went to the Scheduled Transfers tab. Recurring transfer, Parents Mortgage Assist, seat $100. I remembered setting that up 3 years ago, after my father called saying the bank was threatening to foreclose. I hadn't thought about it. I had just said yes. I was already 3 states away and still I said yes. I moved the cursor to delete. I clicked it. A box asked me to confirm. I confirmed. Second transfer. Bree's tuition and expenses N92. I thought about her scrolling Instagram at that dinner table, while my colleagues sat in stunned silence around me. Deleted. Confirmed. I went into my phone carrier account and separated my line into its own individual plan. Removed my card from the family billing. They would get a failed payment notification in the morning. Netflix, password changed, sign out of all devices. Hulu, same. Disney Plus, same. 45 minutes total. When I was done, my monthly outflow had dropped by $2,800, $33,000 a year. I sat with that number in the blue glow of my laptop screen. I did not feel guilty. I had expected guilt. I had been trained to feel it the moment I even considered this. But I just felt quiet, like a machine that had been humming in the background of my entire life had finally been switched off. I went to bed and slept 8 solid hours. In the morning, my phone had 14 texts. My mother, furious about the dinner. My father, asking why the streaming services weren't loading. Bree, saying the tuition payment had bounced and the financial office was emailing her. I read all of them. I put my phone face down on the nightstand. I made coffee in my French press, the good beans I usually saved for when people came over. and drank it on my balcony watching the sun come up over East Nashville. I didn't call back, not that day, not that week, not that month. I started paying attention to my own life with the concentration I had always reserved for everyone else's. I signed up for a Saturday pottery class I'd been meaning to take for 2 years. I had dinner with Felicity and stayed out until midnight, just talking. I bought a throw blanket for my couch that served no practical purpose and cost more than was reasonable, and I did not feel a single second of regret about it. I met Declan at a Hospital Foundation event in February. He was a physical therapist, calm in the way of someone who had never had to perform calmness, who had just always been it. He asked about my work with genuine curiosity. He had a big, affectionate, chaotic extended family in Memphis who sent group texts at all hours and showed up for each other without needing to be asked. The first time I had Sunday dinner at his parents' house, his mother pulled me into a hug at the door, both arms, lingering. She smelled like cinnamon and good hand lotion. "We've heard so much about you," she said. "Come in. You have to try this cornbread. I made it this morning." I excused myself to the bathroom halfway through the meal. I stood at the sink, looked at myself in the mirror, and let exactly 1 minute of tears go. Then I washed my face and went back to the table where there was shouting and laughter and food being passed around and not a single snide comparison being made between siblings. My parents came in April. I don't know how they found my address. Probably a cousin I'd stayed in light contact with, or a hospital association directory that listed my department. I came home from a night shift at 7 to find them in my building lobby, having talked their way past the front entrance. They looked smaller than I remembered. My father's jacket was too thin for the April chill. My mother's face had the tight, rehearsed look of someone who had been preparing a speech for months. I stood in front of them and did not step back. "Clara!" My mother rose from the lobby chair. The crisis pitch was already in her voice. High, urgent, aimed for the center of the old conditioning. "We have been calling you for months. You cut off the transfers without a word. Bree's enrollment is at risk. She had to get a job." "I know," I said. "That's good for her." My mother blinked. "Excuse me?" "Getting a job," I said. "It was good for me when I did it at 17. "That was different." My father stepped forward. "You were always the capable one. Bree needs more support." "She's 23, I said. "I'm done." My mother did what she had always done when facts became inconvenient. She rearranged herself as the victim of my selfishness. She talked about everything they had given up, the sacrifices they had made. How I was throwing away a family over one dinner, over a few words said in a moment of frustration. I let her finish. "You can tell yourself whatever you need to," I said. "I'm not here to argue the history. I'm telling you it's done. I'm not going to keep funding a family that treated me like a utility and called it love." My father's face went red. "We raised you." "You did," I said, "and I spent 11 years paying you back for it. The debt is settled." My mother looked at me the way she had looked at me my whole life, like I was a problem she hadn't figured out how to solve. "You'll regret this," she said. "When you're alone, when you need us, you'll wish you hadn't thrown this away." I thought about Declan's mother at the Sunday dinner table. I thought about Felicity texting at midnight to check in after a hard shift. I thought about Dr. Hartley's letter of recommendation, which called me one of the finest nurses she had worked alongside in 30 years of medicine. "I'm not alone," I said. "That's the thing you never saw coming." I held the lobby door open. They walked out. I watched them cross the parking lot without looking back at me, my father's hand on my mother's elbow, both of them small against the gray April sky. I went upstairs. I made tea and sat by the window and watched a pair of birds do something complicated on the power line outside, and I felt lighter than I had any framework to explain. I've thought a lot about what it means to grow up the way I did. For a long time, I thought it meant I was missing something. Some warmth that other people were born into and I had been denied. Like a nutrient deficiency that stays in your bones no matter how much you try to compensate for it later. I don't believe that anymore. I think some of us have to build the family we needed from scratch. We don't get to inherit it. We have to construct it out of the people who choose to show up, and the choices we make about who we let stay. Declan proposed last November on a trail at Percy Warner Park quietly, in a moment that didn't need an audience. I said yes before he finished the sentence. His mother has already started sending me recipes. My award plaque is on the wall above my desk. I look at it sometimes. Not from pride exactly, but from something more private. A reminder that the girl who grew up feeling like background noise in her own home was seen clearly and completely by people who knew exactly what they were looking at. She always was worth seeing. It just took leaving to find the room where the light was good enough to prove it.